The sky was the wrong color. I noticed it the moment I stepped out of the subway, a wrongness in the air, like the world had been repainted by someone who almost got it right. I told myself it was nerves, pre-interview jitters, and kept walking. I was halfway down Meridian Street when I saw it. It hung above the skyline like a wound, a massive red timer, digits burning in the air as though someone had projected them onto the underside of the clouds. 3 numbers, separated by colons, pulsing with a slow and terrible patience. 30 days, 43,200 minutes, 2,592,000 seconds. I stopped walking. Around me, the city kept moving. A woman in heels nearly walked into my back and muttered something rude. A cyclist swerved. 2 teenagers in school uniforms pushed past without looking up. Not one of them reacted to the thing burning in the sky above their heads. They don't see it. I grabbed the sleeve of the nearest person, a middle-aged man with coffee and a newspaper tucked under his arm. I pointed up. "Do you see that? The numbers, up there." He looked up, looked back at me. His expression moved through polite confusion and landed on mild pity. "Girl," he said, "drink more milk. You look exhausted." He tugged his sleeve free and walked on. I stood on the pavement with the red light washing over my face and counted the digits again. 720, 43,200, 2,582,000 hours, minutes, seconds. 1 month counted down to the very last heartbeat. I had no idea what it meant, no idea why I could see it and no one else could. I had an interview in 11 minutes and my hands were shaking. Later. Figure it out later. I breathed, straightened my blazer, walked. I should tell you a little about myself, since I'm the one who has to tell this story. I graduated top of my class in agricultural science. Student loans, double shifts, secondhand textbooks. I grew up watching my parents tend their vegetable plot with the same pride other people reserve for gold medals. And something about that settled into my bones early. AgriCorps was what every agricultural science graduate aimed for. 3 continents worth of food supply, labs that had invented drought-resistant crops, a glass headquarters that looked exactly like what the future was supposed to look like. 6 months of applications, 2 callbacks. Today was the final round. I walked through the glass doors and was swallowed by cool, climate-controlled air and the soft hum of a building that took itself very seriously. I nailed it. 45 minutes of questions, and I answered every one cleanly. Hydroponic yield optimization, food sovereignty ethics, all of it. I talked about my undergraduate thesis, compact underground growing systems that could function without natural light, with enough passion that one of the interviewers leaned forward in his chair. I walked out with the solid, quiet certainty of someone who has done the thing they set out to do. It was only when I stepped back into the sunlight that I remembered the timer. I looked up, still there, still burning, still counting. 2 hours had already gone. 2 hours out of 720. I shook my head and hailed a cab. Later. I'd figure it out later. I got the job. Of course I did. The call came 3 days later while I was at the supermarket with my mother, debating between 2 brands of cooking oil. I had to step outside into the car park to take it, and when I came back in, she read my face before I said a word and pulled me into a hug that smelled of the lavender soap she had used for as long as I could remember. "My daughter," she said, squeezing hard. "My brilliant daughter." Josh was at our apartment when I got home. He was sitting on the sofa with his shoes on, a habit I had mentioned 3 times now, watching something on his phone with the volume up. I told him the news and he nodded, not quite looking at me. "Good," he said. "We need the money." Not congratulations, not well done, not I knew you could do it. Good. We need the money. I stood in the hallway for a moment, still in my coat, and felt something shift quietly in my chest. Not quite hurt, not quite surprise. More like the confirmation of something I had been trying not to know. I put my bag down. I made dinner. I did not mention the timer in the sky. I'll look into it this weekend, I told myself, when I have a clear head, when work slows down. Work did not slow down. Agricor devoured me whole, and I let it. Before 7 every morning, after 9 every night. I loved it, the scope, the scale, the feeling of finally being in a room where the problems were as large as they needed to be. I told myself the timer could wait. I knew it couldn't. Knowing and acting are different things, and I chose, day after day, to know without acting. 500 hours, 400, 300. The numbers burned and I looked away. Then my body made the decision for me. Halfway through a presentation to the soil science team, the room tilted sideways. I sat down very suddenly in someone else's chair, and the next thing I knew clearly was a hospital ceiling, an IV line, and my mother's face close to mine, tight with a worry she was trying to hide and failing. "You pushed too hard," she said. "I'm fine," I said. I tried to sit up. I decided immediately I was not fine. 9 days. 9 days left on the timer, and I'm horizontal in a hospital bed. Josh came once. 40 minutes, 35 of them on his phone. He asked whether I had filed our joint tax return. When I pointed out I had just been hospitalized, he said he knew. That was why he was asking while I had the time. Underneath the coldness, though, I noticed something new. The jaw tension. The knee that wouldn't stop bouncing. Josh was scared, had been scared for a while, managing it the way he managed everything, by controlling the people around him, making them smaller, keeping the fear at arm's length. Frightened people are unpredictable. I filed it and said nothing. I was discharged after 3 days, went home. 9 days on the timer had become 6. I unpacked my hospital bag, made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and did not prepare. I told myself I would start tomorrow. Tomorrow became the next day. The next day became the one after that. This, I would later understand, was the worst mistake of my life. It happened on a Thursday evening, 8 days before the end. I had noticed Josh changing over the previous week. Small things. He had started checking the news constantly, not skimming headlines the way he usually did, but staring, reading the same articles twice, his face doing something complicated I couldn't quite name. He had moved the car, asked with studied casualness whether I knew anyone with a house outside the city. Bought 3 extra bags of rice and said it was a sale when I asked. He knows something, I thought. Men like Josh don't talk about fear. They prepare in secret and call it planning. I'd almost reached out, almost said, "I know too. Let me help." I didn't. I told myself there was time. There was not. I was in the kitchen making tea when the front door opened with a force that said clearly this was not a homecoming. I turned. Josh came through the hallway with a duffel bag over one shoulder and his jaw set hard. His eyes were wrong, bright, too bright, the way eyes get when the brain behind them has made a decision it has already stopped questioning. He was sweating. His shirt had been buttoned unevenly and he hadn't noticed or hadn't cared. He was terrified. I could see it plain as anything now, underneath the forward momentum, underneath the set jaw and the bag and the purpose. He was a man who had finally understood that something was coming and had responded the only way he knew how, by taking what he could and moving fast, and not thinking too hard about anyone he left behind. "I need the supplies," he said. "All of it. The emergency kit, the canned goods, the water jugs. Move." "Josh!" I said, "Move." My mother appeared in the bedroom doorway. Josh didn't look at her. He went straight to the storage cupboard and started pulling things out. The emergency kit, the canned food, the water jugs, the medical supplies, the battery pack. His hands were not quite steady. He was breathing through his nose in short, controlled bursts, the way people do when they're trying very hard not to panic, and not quite succeeding. "That's our food," I said. My voice came out steadier than my hands. Josh, listen to me. There's something coming. I know what it is. I've been trying to prepare, and you're taking the only preparation we have. You don't know anything. He said it quickly, like he needed to believe it. Nobody knows anything. I have somewhere to go, and I need supplies, and I don't have time for this. Then take me with you. Take both of us. He stopped, just for a second. I saw it, the flicker of something that might, in a different version of him, have been the beginning of a different choice. Then it closed over. His jaw tightened. He looked at me the way people look at things they've decided are not their problem, and I understood that the calculation had already been done and I had not been on the right side of it. He turned back to the cupboard. "There's not enough room," he said, "and you'll slow me down." "Josh!" He spun around, and the slap landed before I had finished saying his name. The sound was shockingly loud in the small hallway. My face snapped sideways, and I hit the wall. My mother made a sound, not quite a scream, something worse, and moved toward me. Josh grabbed her arm and shoved, and she stumbled into the wall, and I sat on the floor of my own hallway with my cheek burning and watched the man I had trusted with 2 years of my life take everything I had scraped together and walk out with it. He paused at the door. His back was to me. I could see the tension in his shoulders. He was shaking slightly, just slightly, and I understood that this was not the action of a man who felt nothing. This was the action of a man who felt everything and had decided to do it anyway. That, somehow, was worse. "Don't follow me," he said quietly. Then he left. The lock clicked behind him. We were on the street within an hour because Josh had also taken my spare key, and I was afraid of what might happen if I was still inside when he decided he needed something else. It was cold. My mother held my arm, and we stood under the amber light of a street lamp, and I looked up at the sky. The timer was almost gone. The numbers were so small I had to squint to read them. A deep and nauseating regret settled through me like cold water filling a room. I knew. I knew for 30 days. I saw it every morning and every evening, and I told myself there was time. I told myself later. I always said later. "Cassia," my mother said quietly, "what is happening?" I opened my mouth to answer. Then the sky tore open. It began with a sound. Low, resonant, the kind of frequency you feel in your back teeth before your ears register it. I heard it standing on the street outside our building, my mother pressed against my side, both of us with nowhere to go. The sky at the edges had gone wrong, a deep arterial red spreading inward like ink dropped in water. Then the crack appeared, running across the clouds like a fault line, like something enormous on the other side had driven a fist through the fabric of the world. They fell through it. Bodies. Dozens. Then hundreds. They hit the road and the rooftops and the cars with sounds I didn't have words for. My mother grabbed my arm with both hands. Neither of us moved. Then they stood up. Not all of them, but enough. They rose from the concrete in jerking, puppeted movements, heads rolling before steadying, and when they turned, I saw their faces and understood. Fast, complete, no room for doubt, that whoever had been in those bodies was not there anymore. White eyes, hollow and total, black nails, long and curving, purple lips, bruised, dark, and they were fast, not stumbling, not lurching, fast in the way of things that have no hesitation left in them, no pain to slow them down, nothing left to protect. The police came hard and fast, 6 cars, officers out with weapons already up. They opened fire and the zombies stumbled with the impact and kept walking. Aim for the head! For the head! It didn't matter. There were too many, and they kept coming through the crack in the sky, and the ones already on the ground moved faster than the officers could track. I watched a line of police simply stop existing as a line. Screaming from every direction. Car alarms, glass, fire from something on the next block, orange light blooming up the face of a building, people running everywhere, some of them toward the zombies by accident, which was the worst thing I saw. I grabbed my mother and ran. Left, then right, then a side street that ended in a wall. I spun around. One of them had followed the sound of our footsteps. I understood that instantly, would understand it more completely later. and it stood at the entrance to the alley and tilted its head, a gesture so human it was obscene on that face, with those eyes. The timer. 30 days. I saw it every single morning, and I said later. I always said later. It moved toward us. I pulled my mother behind me. Useless. I knew it was useless. There was a wall at our backs and no time and nothing in my hands, and the thought I had in that last fraction of a second was not fear, not regret, just a cold and total clarity, the kind that comes too late to be useful. I had 1 month, and I wasted every single day of it. Cold, then white, then nothing. I was standing on Meridian Street. Portfolio bag, blazer, the smell of the food cart on the corner, the sound of morning traffic, the sun at the particular angle it reached at 8:47 on a Tuesday in early autumn. I did not move for a full 30 seconds. I stood on the pavement while the city moved around me, and I cataloged every physical sensation with the methodical intensity of someone who has died once and needs to be absolutely certain they are no longer dead. My cheek did not hurt. My hands were steady. I was not cold. I looked up. 30 days. 43,200 minutes. 2,592 seconds. Full. Fresh. Burning. Oh.
Hey, you're still here. If this story is resonating with you and you haven't subscribed yet, taking a second to do so really helps me keep creating stories like this. All right, let's get back to it.
That single word carried everything. The full weight of what had happened compressed into one point of understanding. I had died. I had been given back. The timer had reset. I had 30 days again, and this time I knew, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who had watched the world end from a dead-end street, exactly what was coming. I pulled out my phone. My hands were not shaking. I was past shaking. I opened a new note and began to type, standing right there on the pavement with people splitting around me like a river around a stone. I did not stop for 20 minutes. I typed everything. The exact date and time the timer would hit 0, the way the sky looked before it split, the speed of the zombies and the fact that bullets did not stop them, the way crowds attracted them, noise and density and chaos drawing them like moths to light, Josh and exactly what he would do and when, the importance of high ground, the importance of isolation, the importance of food production, not just food storage, because storage would eventually run out, and production would not. I typed the name of the village where my parents had grown up, remote, elevated, small enough to defend, with soil I understood in my bones, and I underlined it 3 times. Then I put my phone in my pocket and started walking. Not toward the AgriCorps building. Away from it. No interview, no dream job. Not this time. This time I have something more important to do. My parents thought I had broken under the pressure of the final interview. I sat them down at the kitchen table that first evening, my father with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, my mother with a cup of tea going cold between her palms, and I told them everything. The timer, the sky, the zombies, the way the city had collapsed in minutes, the way I had died in a dead-end street with nothing prepared and no one to blame but myself. My father took his glasses off and set them carefully on the table. My mother's expression went through several stages before settling on a species of concerned calm. "I know how this sounds," I said. "I know, but I am asking you to trust me completely, and I am asking you to start right now, tonight, because we have 30 days, and I intend to use every hour of them." A long silence. My father looked at my mother looked at me. Then she picked up her tea and took a sip and said, "What do you need us to do?" That was the moment I understood that the greatest fortune I had was not the warning in the sky. It was these 2 people sitting across from me at a kitchen table in the early evening, willing to believe in me when belief required everything. We moved to the village within 48 hours. It was the right place. I had always known it was the right place. My grandparents had built the house there, a 2-story stone villa on a hill above the valley, surrounded by fields that our family had farmed for 3 generations. The nearest city was an hour away by car. The nearest significant population was a cluster of 30-odd houses in the village below. The elevation was important. The isolation was important. The quality of the soil, which I knew as well as I knew my own handwriting, was important. I hired workers on the second day. I paid them double the going rate and in cash, and told them there was a bonus for every day finished ahead of schedule. They thought I was eccentric. They showed up on time regardless. The walls went up first. Stone and reinforced timber, the existing perimeter of the property strengthened to something that could withstand sustained pressure. I specified the dimensions myself, drawing on everything I knew about how structures needed to interact with their environment across multiple seasons. My father learned quickly and had strong opinions about load bearing, which turned out to be useful. My mother organized the workers' schedules with an efficiency that I found both impressive and slightly frightening. The underground greenhouse was my masterpiece. I had written my undergraduate thesis on exactly this kind of system: compact, subterranean, dependent on artificial light rather than sunlight, and therefore immune to whatever the sky decided to do above ground. I directed its construction myself, specifying the grow lights and the hydroponic channels and the climate control system that would keep the temperature at a precise 18 degrees, regardless of what happened outside. I planted hybrid crops selected for yield density and nutritional value: tomatoes, leafy greens, root vegetables, legumes. I added a second chamber for grain storage. The stockroom filled steadily. Canned goods and rotating stock so nothing expired, water and sealed drums, enough for 4 months of sustained use for 3 people, more if the rains came right. Medical supplies, antibiotics, bandages, sutures, a manual I studied until I could find any entry by page number in the dark, generator fuel stored in fireproof containers at the eastern edge of the property, batteries, tools, seeds for 10 cycles of replanting. I built the livestock pen on day 12. Chickens first, dual-purpose breeds, good for eggs and meat, then goats for milk, then 3 pigs I named after historical agricultural scientists, which amused my father enormously. The animals were noisy and difficult, and I loved them immediately, with the uncomplicated affection of someone who understood that they represented life continuing in its most fundamental form. And every morning at 5:30, before the workers arrived, I ran. I had never been particularly athletic. My body was lean from years of not quite eating enough, not from training. But I ran anyway, starting with 2 kilometers that left me gasping and building grimly toward something more respectable. My parents joined me on day 4. My father, who had been a runner in his 20s, pulled ahead of me by day 8 and had the grace to wait at the turning point without making it obvious. My mother improved more slowly, but with more determination, and by day 20 she was running the full circuit without stopping, which she treated as casually as everything else she did well. We trained our reflexes in the evenings. I had watched the zombies move, watched them track sound and react to motion, and I trained my family to be still, to be quiet, to move with the controlled deliberateness of people who understood that chaos attracted attention and stillness did not. I taught them the pressure points in the fence sensors I had installed. I walked them through every emergency protocol until they could execute it without prompting. I meditated each morning after the run, sitting in the field as the sun came up, breathing, making myself calm the way you make a room clean, methodically, one corner at a time. I had learned in my first life through the month that exhaustion made me stupid and fear made me slow, and I could not afford to be either. On day 17, I installed the speaker system. I had thought carefully about Josh, not about revenge, though revenge was in there, I won't pretend it wasn't. The primary purpose was noise management. The zombies followed sound. The speakers were aimed at the apartment block where Josh lived, 20 minutes down the valley road. One switch from the kitchen would activate them. A gift, I told myself, for a man who took everything I had and left me in the street. I did not feel good about it. I also did not feel bad enough to disconnect the speakers. That same evening, my phone buzzed. Josh. I stood in the courtyard holding the phone and looked at his name on the screen for a long time. The message underneath read, "Where are you? I went to your mom's place and it's empty. Are you okay?" 3 sentences, no punctuation on the last one, and something in the phrasing, "Are you okay?" not "I need something," that made my chest do a complicated thing I did not have time for. I typed back, "We're fine. Don't come looking for us." I watched the screen for a minute. The ticks went blue. He had read it. No reply came. I put the phone in my pocket and went back to work. That night, just after 11, I saw something from the south wall that I couldn't explain. A figure on the valley road below, moving fast, far too fast, even accounting for the distance in my tired eyes. Not running, something smoother than running, like the space between strides had been edited out. It crossed the full visible stretch of the road in the time it should have taken to cross a third of it. And then it was gone into the tree line, and the road was empty, and I stood at the wall for a long time afterward, telling myself it was a trick of the dark. I didn't write it on my checklist. I didn't know what category it belonged to. On day 22, someone knocked on the villa gate. My father and I were at the east wall when we heard it. 3 deliberate knocks, spaced apart. The knock of someone who wanted to be heard but not to alarm. My father looked at me. I picked up my pipe from where it leaned against the stone, and we went to the gate together. It was a man I didn't recognize. 40s, weather-worn, a large backpack, a child's hand visible at his side. The child was maybe 7. "We saw your lights," the man said. "We've been walking for 4 days." I looked at him for a moment, then at the child. The child was looking at me with the specific flat exhaustion of someone who has been frightened for too long and has used up their fear. "Where from?" I asked. "The coast road. Our car ran out 3 days ago." I opened the gate. I fed them and let them sleep in the outbuilding, and in the morning I sat down with the man and explained, clearly and without softening it, exactly what was coming and what I was prepared to offer and what I needed in return. He was a structural engineer. He spent the last 7 days of the preparation reinforcing the north wall, which I had been worried about but hadn't had the knowledge to fix properly. His daughter named all 3 pigs. My father pretended to be annoyed about this, and was not. On day 29, I walked through the property alone in the late afternoon with my checklist. Walls, solid. Greenhouse, 3 complete growing cycles already complete, 4th cycle at 2 weeks. Stockroom, full. Livestock, healthy, producing. Generator, tested and running. Medical bay, stocked and cataloged. Training, complete. Sensors, active. Speakers, armed. I stood in the middle of the courtyard and looked around at what 30 days and everything I knew had made possible. The stone walls in the golden afternoon light, the sound of the chickens from the pen, the faint hum from the greenhouse below ground, which meant the climate control was running exactly as it should be. My father on a ladder at the far wall, checking the sensor cable for the 4th time because he was my father and he checked things 4 times. My mother came out of the house with 2 mugs of tea and crossed the courtyard and stood beside me, and we looked at the same thing without speaking for a moment. "Are we going to be all right?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "as long as we stay calm, as long as we use everything we've built." She handed me a mug, and we stood in the courtyard in the late sun and drank our tea. 1 day left. 1 day, and then we find out if 30 days of everything I had is enough. I looked up at the sky. The timer was a sliver now, almost gone. I went inside and cooked dinner.
And we ate together, the three of us. And afterwards, my father told a long and improbable story about the time he had tried to fix a tractor engine without knowing anything about tractor engines. And we laughed, and I felt the laughter in my chest like warmth. I went to bed at 10. I slept well. The timer hit 0 at midnight. I was awake. I had set no alarm. I simply woke at 11:53 with the clear, total alertness of someone whose body had been told what was coming. I dressed in the dark, went to the kitchen, turned on the low emergency lighting, amber across the stone floor, checked the sensor panel, green, put the kettle on. At midnight, the sky cracked. I heard it even from inside, that deep subsonic hum, the sound of something fundamental giving way. Through the kitchen window, the red light spread at the horizon, then the split, then the shapes falling through it, small at this distance, tumbling and landing and rising. There you are, right on time. From the city came the first sounds of the collapse. Sirens, then car alarms, then the compound roar of a crowd realizing it is in danger, a sound I had heard before and never wanted to hear again. I watched the city lights flicker and go dark in sections, block by block, the lights of billions of dollars of infrastructure going out like candles in a drought. I felt the sadness of it, vast and quiet, and let it pass through me without stopping. My parents appeared in the doorway, both dressed. My father had already checked the east perimeter. My mother's face was calm in the way it got when she had decided to be useful rather than afraid. "It started," I said. "The walls?" my father asked. "Holding, nothing close. They track noise. We're quiet." I poured 3 mugs of tea and set them on the table. "Sit down. The preparation is doing its work. We don't need to." We sat. We drank. Far away, the end of the world made its sounds. The rioters reached Josh's building just after 2 in the morning. I could hear them from the hill, voices raised, breaking glass, the specific ugly energy of people who have decided the rules no longer apply. My sensor panel showed movement at the valley perimeter, distant, drifting away from us. I watched it for a moment, then I went to the speaker control and flipped the switch. The music came out of the darkness below, loud, bright, impossible to ignore. The zombies tracked noise. I knew this. I watched the dots on the sensor panel shift direction, slow, then converge on Josh's block. I flipped the switch off, went back to the kitchen. I told myself I didn't know what would happen to him, that he had supplies, that he was smart enough to survive if he kept quiet. I almost believed it. The confirmation came 2 days later in the news footage. I wasn't looking for him. My father and I were watching the city feed, a helicopter shot panning across the main boulevard near the old shopping district. Mostly zombies by then, moving in their coordinated, purposeful way through the wreckage below. But the camera slowed over a group gathered near a familiar building. Josh's building. I knew the blue facade, the half-collapsed balcony on the 3rd floor he'd complained about since we moved in. I knew the gray jacket, too. He'd bought it last winter. I had been with him. He was standing still in the middle of the group, head tilted, eyes, even at this resolution, even at this distance, wrong, white, hollow, moving with them, not away from them. My father didn't say anything. Neither did I. I closed the feed and sat with my hands flat on the table for a long moment, and I felt not grief exactly, and not satisfaction either, something older and quieter than either of those. The particular weight of a door that has been closed for good. He'd been afraid. He'd made his choices from that fear, and the world had answered. I got up and went to check the greenhouse.
By dawn, the villa was intact. The greenhouse was running, the livestock had been fed, and I was harvesting the first batch of the fourth tomato cycle by lamplight in the underground chamber while my mother baked bread above ground and my father monitored the sensors with the focused attention of a man who had found, late in life, a skill he was genuinely good at. Outside, the world was burning. Inside the walls, there was bread and tomatoes and the hum of grow lights and 3 people who were going to be all right. On the 3rd day, I made a mistake. Not a tactical one, walls held, sensors green, greenhouse running. The mistake was simpler. I opened my phone and started watching the news. Signal was patchy, but enough. Automated feeds, emergency broadcasts, timestamps running in real time. My father found me at 2 in the morning still watching. He sat down beside me without a word, and together we watched what was happening to the world we had left behind. The city center footage was the worst. Someone had set a camera on a high floor pointing down at the main boulevard. Day 2, 11:47 p.m. The street below was a river of bodies, and most of them were not alive. The zombies moved in packs. New. In my first loop, they had seemed almost random, swarming toward noise and chaos. But this was coordinated, like the murmuration of starlings translated into something murderous. They circled a supermarket methodically, testing each barricaded door in turn. There were people inside. I could see the lights on the 2nd floor. Then one of the doors buckled. My father put his hand over mine, and I let him, and we watched the screen go dark. A news helicopter was still broadcasting, the pilot narrating in the flat voice of someone past fear. Below him, military vehicles holding a bridge, soldiers firing in controlled bursts at a zombie wave crossing from the far bank. For 90 seconds, it looked like it was working. Then the zombies came from below. They had gone into the river. I hadn't considered that, whether they needed to breathe, whether the instinct driving them toward noise extended to going under rather than around. It did. They came up through the bridge structure from both sides at once, and the formation broke, and after that, it was not a battle anymore. I closed the feed. I sat in the amber light and breathed carefully. Let the information settle rather than drown me. They can go underwater. They group. Conventional tactics are failing. File it. Use it. I rewound to the bridge footage. In the chaos, easy to miss, camera swinging, a figure moved against the flow. Not away from the zombies, toward them, at a speed that made everyone else look stationary. Gone in 2 seconds. I watched it 4 more times. I bookmarked the timestamp. Probably nothing. I didn't entirely believe that. The breach came on day 4, just before dawn. I was already awake when the east perimeter sensor tripped, pressure consistent with something human-sized, then a second reading, then a third. I was in the corridor before the 4th activated. "Dad," I put my hand on his door. "East wall, 3, maybe 4. Get up now." He was dressed and behind me in 45 seconds. I had the emergency kit from the hallway cupboard, 2 lengths of hardened steel pipe I had bought for exactly this purpose, wrapped in grip tape, and I passed one to him without a word. My mother appeared at the bedroom door. I pointed to the greenhouse hatch in the kitchen floor. "Down. Lock it from inside. Do not open it for anyone but us. I promise we're coming back." She held my gaze for 1 second, then she went. My father and I moved through the courtyard in silence. No torch. I had trained us both to navigate by the perimeter lamp glow, which was dim enough not to attract attention from outside the walls. The east sensor box was mounted near the fig tree my grandfather had planted 40 years ago, and as we came around the corner of the outbuilding, I saw them. 4. They had come over the fence at its lowest point, the section I had reinforced twice, but which still sat a few centimeters shorter than the rest because of the way the ground dropped away on that side. A planning failure. I cataloged it in the part of my brain that never really stopped running contingencies, and then I stopped thinking about anything except the 4 things standing between me and my father and the wall. White eyes. They caught the perimeter lamplight and reflected nothing back, which was worse, somehow, than if they had glowed. The nearest one turned its head, and I saw the moment it located me. Not by sight, I thought, not primarily, but by the sound of my breath, by the warmth of me and the cold air. Its head moved the way a dog's head moves when it hears a frequency just at the edge of hearing. Then it came. fast. God, they were fast. I had known that, had watched it happen, had trained for it, but knowing and standing your ground while something that used to be human accelerates toward you at that speed are two entirely different experiences. My body wanted to run. I had spent 30 days training it not to. I planted my feet and swung the pipe. The weight of it surprised me every time in training. In real life, with something coming at you, the weight became your friend. I caught the first one across the side of the head, not a killing blow, I couldn't afford to pull back enough for that, but enough to knock it sideways into the fence post. It hit the post, bounced, and came back up. They always came back up. The second one went for my father. I heard him shout, not in fear, in effort, and the crack of his pipe connecting, and then a grunt from him that meant he had taken a hit but was still standing. I couldn't look. I had two of my own to manage. The one I'd knocked into the fence was back on its feet and moving differently now, slower, its coordination disrupted, the head injury doing something to whatever passed for its motor function. I went for the same spot again, harder this time. It went down and did not immediately get back up. The third came at me from the side, from lower than I expected. It had dropped to a crouch at some point without me tracking it, and the lunge it made hit me in the ribs rather than wherever it had aimed. I went sideways into the outbuilding wall, stone against my shoulder blade. My hand kept hold of the pipe. My training had been specific about the pipe. You do not let go of the pipe. I got my feet under me and put the wall at my back and waited the half second for it to come again, and when it did, I had the pipe across its throat, and I used the wall for leverage, and I pushed and pushed and pushed, until the thing that had been a person made a sound that I will not describe and went still. I turned around. My father had two down. He was breathing hard and bleeding from a gash above his eyebrow where the fourth one had caught him with its nails. It was still up, circling him, and he was tracking it with the pipe held two-handed, and his footwork was exactly what we had drilled. Weight back, ready to move, not planted. I hit it from behind, once, hard at the base of the skull. It dropped. For a moment, we both just stood there, breathing. "The cut," I said finally. "Nail, not a bite." He touched his forehead carefully. "Nail." We had established in preparation that nail wounds didn't transmit. Bites did. Scratches did not. I exhaled. "Okay," I said. "Okay, let's fix the fence before it's light." He looked at me for a moment. Something passed across his face. Not quite pride, not quite fear, something in between that had no clean name. "You were very calm," he said. "I was terrified," I said. "Yes," he said, "but you were very calm." We fixed the fence, we cleaned the wound, we went back inside where my mother had made tea and was sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around the mug so tightly her knuckles were pale, and when she saw us, she set the mug down and said nothing at all, just stood up, and that was enough. The first disaster receded before the second one arrived, the way one wave pulls back to give the next one room. The zombie population thinned over weeks. The sounds from the valley changed. Less roar, more silence. Fewer sirens, more wind. Then the temperature dropped. Not autumn, not seasonal. This was winter arriving as a verdict. In 3 days, the valley floor fell 30 degrees. Frost crept up the hillside, and in the morning, the world below looked like it had been cast in pale glass. The greenhouse held at 18 degrees. The stockroom had winter clothing and blankets by the crate. The walls kept the worst of the wind out. I had prepared for cold. I just hadn't known how cold. What I hadn't planned for was the villagers. They found us by our perimeter lamps, a handful of families from the houses below, the ones who had barricaded in time or run uphill instead of toward the roads. I kept the lights on for them. I had decided, somewhere in a cold and quiet night, that I didn't want to survive by pretending the world outside our walls was empty. I distributed clothing and blankets from the back gate, divided stockroom portions carefully, not generously enough to endanger my family's winter, not stingily enough to condemn anyone unnecessarily. "How did you have all this?" asked a woman from the third house down. She had 2 children with her, both wearing adult-sized socks on their hands. I prepared, I said, and gave the children proper gloves from the box I had bought in October and felt at the time slightly embarrassed about. I prepared and you didn't. Mean thought. Gone as fast as it came. They didn't see the timer. They didn't know. Cruelty is a choice, and I hadn't survived all of this to become cruel. The Ice Age lasted weeks. The zombies slowed to a near stop in the deep cold. The walls held. The greenhouse never stopped producing. Every morning my parents and I ran our circuit in the frost, breath misting, and I thought, something will always come next. The question is always who is standing when each reset completes. The floods came fast. The ice had been building for weeks. When it went at all once. One morning I woke to a sound that wasn't water running, it was water arriving, the full weight of the freeze releasing in hours. I watched it from the wall. The village below filled first, bottom floors, then rooftops, until it was just dark tiles rising from a gray inland sea. The city beyond went the same way. The Agricore Tower, which I could just see on a clear day, was gone by afternoon. My father stood beside me and watched in silence. "You chose this hill," he said. "Yes." "How did you know the elevation would be enough?" "I didn't. I planned as though it needed to be more than enough." He nodded. That's good engineering. The highest compliment he gave to anything. The water stopped 8 meters from our walls. The greenhouse was sealed and intact. The generator sat dry on its raised platform. We were an island, the valley and inland sea around us. I cooked dinner. We ate together, the 3 of us, with the sound of water somewhere below the hill and the hum of the greenhouse and the chickens settling in for the night. "We made it," my mother said, holding her tea with both hands. "We made it," I said. Not triumph, something quieter. The peace of someone who gave everything they had and found it was, just barely, enough. The water took 3 weeks to fully recede. In that time, I assembled a picture from radio signals, passing survivors, fragments of satellite feed, whatever reached us. The zombies were thinning. The cold had slowed them, the floods had taken many of them, and something else was happening, something harder to name. People were fighting back. Not with guns, not with military formations that collapsed the moment the zombies adapted, with something else entirely. My father repaired our antenna on day 41 after the floods. For 20 uninterrupted minutes, we had a clear signal from a broadcast tower several hundred kilometers north. I recognized what I was seeing immediately, the same kind of impossible movement I had glimpsed on the valley road during preparation, the figure I had told myself was a trick of the dark. It was not a trick of the dark. The footage was from a city that had partially survived, a coastal settlement on high ground that had weathered the flood and maintained maybe 8,000 living residents behind a barricade of wrecked vehicles and shipping containers. The barricade was holding, had been holding for weeks, until the zombies found it, in numbers. The camera was on a roof somewhere inside the barricade, pointed outward. It shook slightly. Whoever was holding it was shaking. On the screen, the barricade was being hit. The vehicles were moving, grinding slowly inward under sustained pressure from outside. Hundreds of zombies pushing at once, the collective weight of them more than the structure had been built to handle. People on top of the barricade were fighting, using whatever they had, pipes and rebar and repurposed tools, knocking things back as fast as they came over the top. It was the wall I had survived in my own courtyard, scaled up into something that looked like a medieval siege, and it was failing. You could see that from the camera angle. It was failing, and everyone in that city knew it. Then, the 3 figures appeared. They came from inside the barricade, moving through the crowd of defenders at a pace that made the defenders look like they were standing still. Even on a shaky video feed, even at distance, what they were was immediately obvious. This was not normal human movement. This was not the desperate scramble of people who were frightened and trying to hold the line. This was something else entirely. The first one, a woman, tall, her hair pulled back, dressed in mismatched gear that looked like she had assembled it from 3 different dead men's wardrobes, hit the barricade from the inside and went over the top of it in a single motion, as though gravity had agreed to be flexible on her behalf. She landed on the other side in the middle of the zombie mass, and the camera operator scrambled to track her, and for a few seconds we lost her in the bodies. Then the bodies started moving differently, away from her rather than toward her, which was wrong. They were not capable of fear. I had been certain of that. I had built my entire preparation on that certainty. Then the camera found her, and I understood why. She was moving through them the way water moves through a fist, not fighting them one by one the way my father and I had fought the 4 in our courtyard, that exhausting, careful, expensive combat where every second costs you something. She was simply in motion, constant and flowing, and the zombies that came in contact with her motion did not get back up. The third came at me from the side, from lower than I expected. It had dropped to a crouch at some point without me tracking it, and the lunge it made hit me in the ribs rather than wherever it had aimed. I went sideways into the outbuilding wall, stone against my shoulder blade. My hand kept hold of the pipe. My training had been specific about the pipe. You do not let go of the pipe. I got my feet under me and put the wall at my back and waited the half second for it to come again. And when it did, I had the pipe across its throat, and I used the wall for leverage, and I pushed and pushed and pushed until the thing that had been a person made a sound that I will not describe and went still. I turned around. My father had 2 down. He was breathing hard and bleeding from a gash above his eyebrow where the 4th one had caught him with its nails. It was still up, circling him, and he was tracking it with the pipe held 2-handed, and his footwork was exactly what we had drilled: weight back, ready to move, not planted. I hit it from behind, once, hard, at the base of the skull. It dropped. For a moment we both just stood there, breathing. "The cut," I said finally. "Nail, not a bite." He touched his forehead carefully. "Nail." We had established in preparation that nail wounds didn't transmit. Bites did. Scratches did not. I exhaled. "Okay," I said. "Okay, let's fix the fence before it's light." He looked at me for a moment. Something passed across his face. Not quite pride, not quite fear. Something in between that had no clean name. "You were very calm," he said. "I was terrified," I said. "Yes," he said, "but you were very calm." We fixed the fence, we cleaned the wound, we went back inside, where my mother had made tea and was sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around the mug so tightly her knuckles were pale, and when she saw us, she set the mug down and said nothing at all, just stood up, and that was enough. The first disaster receded before the second one arrived, the way one wave pulls back to give the next one room. The zombie population thinned over weeks. The sounds from the valley changed: less roar, more silence, fewer sirens, more wind. Then the temperature dropped. Not autumn, not seasonal. This was winter arriving as a verdict. In 3 days, the valley floor fell 30 degrees. Frost crept up the hillside, and in the morning the world below looked like it had been cast in pale glass. The greenhouse held at 18 degrees. The stockroom had winter clothing and blankets by the crate. The walls kept the worst of the wind out. I had prepared for cold, I just hadn't known how cold. What I hadn't planned for was the villagers. They found us by our perimeter lamps, a handful of families from the houses below, the ones who had barricaded in time or run uphill instead of towards the roads. I kept the lights on for them. I had decided, somewhere in a cold and quiet night, that I didn't want to survive by pretending the world outside our walls was empty. I distributed clothing and blankets from the back gate, divided stockroom portions carefully, not generously enough to endanger my family's winter, not stingily enough to condemn anyone unnecessarily. "How did you have all this?" asked a woman from the third house down. She had 2 children with her, both wearing adult-sized socks on their hands. "I prepared," I said, and gave the children proper gloves from the box I had bought in October and felt, at the time, slightly embarrassed about. I prepared, and you didn't. Mean thought, gone as fast as it came. They didn't see the timer. They didn't know. Cruelty is a choice, and I hadn't survived all of this to become cruel. The Ice Age lasted weeks. The zombies slowed to a near stop in the deep cold. The walls held. The greenhouse never stopped producing. Every morning my parents and I ran our circuit in the frost, breath misting, and I thought, something will always come next. The question is always who is standing when each reset completes. The floods came fast. The ice had been building for weeks. When it went all at once. One morning I woke to a sound that wasn't water running. It was water arriving. The full weight of the freeze releasing in hours. I watched it from the wall. The village below filled first, bottom floors, then rooftops, until it was just dark tiles rising from a gray inland sea. The city beyond went the same way. The Agricor Tower, which I could just see on a clear day, was gone by afternoon. My father stood beside me and watched in silence. "You chose this hill," he said finally. "Yes." "How did you know the elevation would be enough?" "I didn't. I planned as though it needed to be more than enough." He nodded. "That's good engineering." The highest compliment he gave to anything. The water stopped 8 meters from our walls. The greenhouse was sealed and intact. The generator sat dry on its raised platform. We were an island, the valley an inland sea around us. I cooked dinner. We ate together, the 3 of us, with the sound of water somewhere below the hill and the hum of the greenhouse and the chickens settling in for the night. "We made it," my mother said, holding her tea with both hands. "We made it," I said. Not triumph, something quieter. The peace of someone who gave everything they had and found it was, just barely, enough. The water took 3 weeks to fully recede. In that time, I assembled a picture from radio signals, passing survivors, fragments of satellite feed, whatever reached us. The zombies were thinning. The cold had slowed them, the floods had taken many of them, and something else was happening, something harder to name. People were fighting back. Not with guns, not with military formations that collapsed the moment the zombies adapted, with something else entirely. My father repaired our antenna on day 41 after the floods. For 20 uninterrupted minutes, we had a clear signal from a broadcast tower several hundred kilometers north. I recognized what I was seeing immediately. The same kind of impossible movement I had glimpsed on the valley road during preparation. The figure I had told myself was a trick of the dark. It was not a trick of the dark. The footage was from a city that had partially survived, a coastal settlement on high ground that had weathered the flood and maintained maybe 8,000 living residents behind a barricade of wrecked vehicles and shipping containers. The barricade was holding, had been holding for weeks, until the zombies found it in numbers. The camera was on a roof somewhere inside the barricade, pointed outward. It shook slightly. Whoever was holding it was shaking. On the screen, the barricade was being hit. The vehicles were moving, grinding slowly inward under sustained pressure from outside, the collective weight of them more than the structure had been built to handle. People on top of the barricade were fighting, using whatever they had, pipes and rebar and repurposed tools, knocking things back as fast as they came over the top. It was the wall I had survived in my own courtyard, scaled up into something that looked like a medieval siege. And it was failing. You could see that from the camera angle. It was failing, and everyone in that city knew it. Then, the 3 figures appeared. They came from inside the barricade, moving through the crowd of defenders at a pace that made the defenders look like they were standing still. Even on a shaky video feed, even at distance, What they were was immediately obvious.
This was not normal human movement. This was not the desperate scramble of people who were frightened and trying to hold the line. This was something else entirely. The first one, a woman, tall, her hair pulled back, dressed in mismatched gear that looked like she had assembled it from 3 different dead men's wardrobes, hit the barricade from the inside and went over the top of it in a single motion, as though gravity had agreed to be flexible on her behalf. She landed on the other side in the middle of the zombie mass, and the camera operator scrambled to track her, and for a few seconds we lost her in the bodies. Then the bodies started moving differently, away from her rather than toward her, which was wrong. They were not capable of fear. I had been certain of that. I had built my entire preparation on that certainty. And then the camera found her again, and I understood why. She was moving through them the way water moves through a fist, not fighting them one by one the way my father and I had fought the 4 in our courtyard, that exhausting, careful, expensive combat where every second costs you something. She was simply in motion, constant and flowing, and the zombies that came in contact with her motion did not get back up. Her hands, her elbows, the flat of her forearm, the heel of her foot, every point of contact was a termination point. No wasted energy, no hesitation. Nothing the zombie's speed advantage could catch, because she was faster than their speed advantage. The second figure went up the barricade differently, straight up, hands and feet finding purchase on the stacked vehicle chassis in a way that should not have been possible at that pace, and reached the top and simply started throwing things. Not small things. He picked up a sedan by the front axle and swung it. The wave of zombies it hit went down and stayed down for long enough to matter. "That is not possible," my father said quietly beside me. "I know," I said. The third figure was the one that stayed with me longest afterward. He stood just inside the barricade line and he was still, completely still, while everything around him was chaos. He stood with his eyes closed and his hands at his sides, and I watched him for 30 seconds, not doing anything at all, and then the zombies near the base of the barricade began to turn. Not toward him, away. All at once, like a school of fish reversing direction, the mass of them began to move away from the section of wall he was standing behind and toward the section 200 meters further along where the pressure had been lighter. He was redirecting them without touching them, without making a sound I could hear. He was standing still, and the herd was responding. Infrasound, I thought. Something below the threshold of human hearing, but inside whatever frequency the zombies tracked. He had become, evolved into, been transformed into, a living signal they couldn't ignore. Within 4 minutes, the barricade pressure had halved. Within 12, the zombies were retreating, actually retreating, moving away in a disorganized mass that looked nothing like the coordinated siege I had watched on day 2. The camera operator lowered their phone, and for a moment, we were just looking at wet concrete and their own feet. Then they lifted it again and pointed it at the 3 figures, who had regrouped just inside the barricade gate. The woman was checking a gash on her forearm with the same practical expression I recognized from my father checking his own forehead wound in our courtyard. The man who had thrown the car was laughing. Not triumphant laughter, the slightly hysterical laughter of someone who has just done something their body is still processing as impossible. The still one had opened his eyes. He looked directly at the camera for a moment, and I could not read his expression at all, not because it was blank, because it contained something I did not have a reference for. The signal cut out. I sat with what I had seen for a long time. My father made tea. My mother sat down and said nothing, her way of giving me space to think. The disasters weren't random. Zombie, ice, flood. Each one a filter, each one a question. Who is left standing? The zombies were one answer. The superhumans were another. The billion ordinary people who died were a third.
And me? I hadn't changed, not physically, but I had known. The timer had chosen me to know, and I had used that to build the walls, dig the greenhouse, and stand my ground in a dark courtyard with a steel pipe. That was my version of whatever those three had. Knowledge, preparation, the refusal to waste the warning. The zombies were thinning. The superhumans were hunting. The world beyond our walls was brutal and transformed, but it was moving. And eventually, I was certain, they would find the hill. I looked at my parents, my mother starting a new pot of tea, my father cleaning his glasses with the same slow, circular motion he had used my entire life. I opened a new note on my phone and started writing. When the water receded, the world that came back was not the one that had gone under. Less than 1 million people. I pieced that together over months. Radio signals, passing survivors, fragments of something slowly becoming human contact again. Billions had lived. 1 million remained. I let the number come in pieces because there was no other way to carry it. Among the survivors, things were changing. A young man appeared at the gate 3 months after the floods. Gaunt, exhausted, asking for water. While he ate, I watched him. A tin fell from the shelf behind him. He caught it without turning, without looking, as though he'd known it was falling before it left the shelf. He noticed me watching. "It happened to some of us," he said simply, "who went through all of it. Something changed." There were others. The world was dividing quietly, those who came through unchanged and those who hadn't. I chose which ones to trust the way I'd always chosen, by what they did when frightened and when they weren't. One evening in the late summer of the changed world, I stood at the wall as the sun went down over the valley below. Green again now. Different. The mud replaced by a growth I did not entirely recognize, but recognized as life. And I did the quiet accounting I did every evening. My parents? Alive. Well. Running their morning circuit faster than they had 6 months ago. The greenhouse, producing its 7th cycle. The hybrid tomatoes doing something extraordinary in the modified soil conditions. The livestock, expanded. A second generation of animals now in the pen. The stockroom, lower than I liked, but sustainable against the greenhouse output and the kitchen garden I had planted outside the walls in the cleared ground. The surrounding community, the survivors from the valley and a dozen others who had found the hill over the months, were building, slowly, with the uncertain energy of people still adjusting to a world that had revised all its previous assumptions about what was stable, but building. This is what survival looks like when it works. Not dramatic, not glorious, just people and food and walls and the patience to keep going. I turned from the valley and looked toward the eastern horizon, where the light was fading fastest. Something moved at the edge of the visible world, a figure, or the suggestion of one, gone before I could be certain I had seen it. Fast, purposeful, organized in a way that neither the wandering survivors nor the dwindling zombies were. I watched the empty horizon for a long moment. Then I looked up. The sky above the villa was clear, the clear of a summer evening, stars beginning to show at the deep end of the blue. But at the very edge of my vision, at the border between the dark and the light, I saw something I had not seen since the night the world ended. A flicker, a color. Not red. Something I had no name for yet. My heart did not race the way it might have done the first time. It simply noted the information with the calm of a person who had learned, the hardest way possible, that knowledge was the only reliable protection against what was coming. And this time, I told myself, I will not waste a single day. Behind me, the villa glowed. I could hear my mother singing in the kitchen. I could smell dinner. I could hear my father telling the chickens off or something, which was a thing he did now, with an authority they never respected. I stood at the wall and watched the horizon and let the familiar sounds wrap around me, and I breathed, and I began to plan. I had survived the end of the world. Now something new was beginning, and this time, I was ready.
If you enjoyed this story, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves dark fantasy, and subscribe for more zombie, horror, and revenge stories. I'll see you in the next nightmare.